Alright lads, welcome back to another War Thunder vehicle review. Today we're going to be taking a look at the LAV-AD. This vehicle was the result of a joint development between the American Army and the US Marine Corps. It was started in the early 80s in an attempt to give American infantry greater mobility. However, due to funding cuts from the American Congress, the US Army pulled out of the deal, which resulted in only the US Marine Corps actually purchasing these vehicles. They were mainly fitted with a 25mm chain gun, but the variant we're looking at today is the anti-aircraft vehicle, designed to create an anti-air platform that could keep up with the more mobile infantry. Obviously, you can see that it uses the same chassis as the LAV, but uses a rotary 25mm cannon, as well as 2 pods of FIM-92 Stinger missiles, each containing 4 rockets. While you can't really criticise the firepower of this thing, the lack of search and track radar, or even an IRST, leaves the LAV-AD quite bland on the battlefield, at least when it comes to War Thunder matches. But anyway, this vehicle is a rank 6 air defence vehicle, obviously in the American tech tree. It sits at battle rating 9.7 in arcade and 10.0 in realistic and simulator. You will have to grind out 220,000 RP points before purchasing it for the cost of 990,000 Silver Lions. Being a tech tree vehicle, it also has quite a hefty crew train cost of 170,000 Silver Lions. And for the expert in Ace qualifications, which to be honest aren't really that important in an anti-aircraft vehicle, it's 590,000 Silver Lions for the expert and 2,100 Golden Eagles for the Ace qualification. While most nations in War Thunder get a anti-aircraft vehicle with heat-seeking missiles at battle rating 9.3, is the LAV-AD at battle rating 10.0 an effective air screen on the battlefield, or does it just get wrecked by KA-50s and Mi-28s? If you'd like to know the answer to that question, boys, stick around for the rest of the video. Alright lads, welcome back. Cracking straight on with it, the mobility and survivability. The LAV-AD weighs 13.4 tons and is powered by an engine producing 725 horsepower. This gives it a power to weight ratio of 20.5 horsepower per ton. In a tank with tracks, this would mean that the LAV would have very good acceleration, but because it is a wheeled vehicle, its acceleration is always going to be a lot slower compared to tracked vehicles. But where wheeled vehicles benefit compared to their tracked brothers is the top speed. The LAV-AD has a top speed of over 100 km per hour, but strangely its reverse speed is only 18 km per hour. I guess they limited the reverse speed for health and safety reasons, but considering these things were only driven by the Marines, they probably should have limited its top speed to 18 km per hour as well. Anyway, before I get a nail bomb delivered to my door, let's move on to the survivability. If we take a look at this cutaway, you can see that we have a crew of 3 men, with a driver in the front of the hull next to the engine, and then a gunner and commander located in the turret itself. Because of the crew only having 3 people inside it, if you take a shot to the turret which kill your commander and your gunner, the vehicle will be instantly destroyed. The anti-aircraft missiles located above the turret are also damage boxes. They can take hits just like any other part of your tank, and if they do get hit they are likely to explode, overpressuring the vehicle, which will also result in the instant death. So our survivability isn't particularly superb. If we take a quick look at the actual armour protection itself, and our lower frontal plate provides around 39mm of protection. The upper frontal plate is a little bit less at only 17mm of protection, but not really going to make that much difference. And finally the turret, which does differ in thicknesses depending on where you go, but it's around 23mm thick, just below an inch. So obviously this thing stands no chance against stopping any sort of main battle tank shell. And it's also an easy penetration for things like the BMP, the BMP-2M, as well as the BMD-4 and the BMP-3. Basically any fast-firing autocannon will rip this thing to shreds. You could make an argument that the engine will stop some spalling, which might protect the crew in the turret from a frontal engagement, but with the turret only being 23mm thick, they can just shoot there and kill you as well. You're also incredibly vulnerable to artillery as well as high explosive rounds in this vehicle. The crew will get overpressured, which is kind of just the modern day hull break really. Ironically, one of the things that this vehicle is most vulnerable to is to helicopters and close air support, but you're designed to shoot them down. So let's go on to the actual weapons of this vehicle. So to start off, this vehicle has pretty high resolution thermal imaging. But as I said in the introduction, it doesn't have any sort of radar, either search or track, or an IRST, or infrared search and track. So you essentially have to use your eyeballs to actually find enemy helicopters or planes. This can make it quite difficult if you aren't really paying attention to the match around you. Even the German 9.3 Weasel, I believe it's called, or something like that, that does have an IRST, which does give it a little bit of a chance in finding targets. I'm actually quite surprised that the LAV-AD is at battle rating 10.0. I guess those other vehicles like the Type 93 and the Weasel, they don't really have a machine gun, they are just limited to the Stinger missiles. But I don't think a 25mm rotary cannon really makes up for a 0.7 battle rating increase. Speaking of which, the LAV-AD is armed with the 25mm GAU-12U Avenger. In game, you can take 1,155 rounds of ammunition into battle. However, I read in a book that it could only carry around 1,000 rounds of ammunition. I'm not quite sure where Gaijin got that figure from, but hey ho, I'm not complaining. I believe this ammunition is carried in the form of 2 belts, and when you use one of the 2 belts, it is quite a long reload time to actually reload that, around 20 seconds with a fully maxed out crew. The gun is also quite limited in its vertical guidance, which is surprising for an anti-aircraft vehicle. You can only elevate the gun up to 60 degrees. True, that is probably going to be enough for almost all of the engagements in War Thunder. It's certainly enough for dealing with helicopters. Maybe if you come across a Harrier that's climbing up to 10,000 feet and then nosediving, maybe you won't be able to deal with him, but that is quite a specific threat. The gun is also stabilised, which you wouldn't really expect. It's quite a small turret, and the turret traverse is actually pretty good with 38 degrees per second rotation. As I was saying, the reload speed for this vehicle when stock is 26 seconds. That's quite a long time to be without main gun ammunition, and with an ace crew it drops down to 20 seconds, which is still quite long to be honest. So I would still recommend being quite disciplined with your fire. We then have quite a unique little trick that the LAV-AD can carry, and you can replace one of your Stinger pods with an M247 rocket launcher pod, I guess. I imagine the US Marine Corps got bored one day, took one of the rocket pods off one of the Harriers and just strapped it onto the top of this thing and saw what would happen. Anyway, these are the M247 rockets. They're the same rockets that are used on the Apache. They have 290mm of penetration, but they do have quite a small warhead of only 1.19 kilos. This gives them pretty high penetration but very limited post-pen damage. They can be used to overpressure smaller vehicles in War Thunder around your battle rating, but considering your battle rating 10.0 and you're going to be fighting against pretty heavily armoured main battle tanks, as well as tanks with ERA and composite armour, 290mm of chemical penetration is pretty ineffective in my opinion. In the setup where you do take along the M247 pod, you will be carrying 19 rockets for that pod, as well as 12 anti-aircraft missiles for your remaining single Stinger pod. Alternatively, if you take 2 Stinger pods, you will be carrying 16 Stinger missiles. You don't really need to take 2 Stinger pods, you can only fire 1 at a time obviously, so it might be within your interest to take the rocket pods as well, despite them being pretty redundant, again, in my opinion. But enough talk about the Stingers, let's actually discuss them. Our stock Stinger is a FIM-92E. It travels at 1000 meters per second, and in theory it has an all aspect lock range of 6 kilometers. However, in practice that's more around 2.5 to 3 kilometers against helicopters, and a little bit more against planes. Planes obviously fly through the sky, which compresses air around them, which heats up the body of the plane. This is why your lock-on range against planes is a lot more than helicopters. Helicopters obviously don't move very fast, so the metal and the skin of the helicopter doesn't really heat up. The E variant does have the ECM mode, which does make it a little bit immune from countermeasures. It's not as good as the Mistrals, but it is certainly better than some of the early IR guided missiles. We then also have the FIM-92K. This is basically the exact same as the E variant, except it is fitted with a proximity fused warhead. So with the E missile, you will have to get a direct hit to actually get a kill. Obviously being an IR missile, you have no ability to guide it after you've launched, which does make it a little bit hit and miss if the enemy sees it coming and starts to maneuver. But with the K variant, your probability of kill should increase, as the missile no longer needs to get a direct impact. It only needs to get close to the target, and then it will self-detonate. So the E variant needs to get a direct hit, whereas the K variant needs to get within 1 meter of a target. Apart from that change though, they are completely the same missile. So I wouldn't really recommend rushing to get the K variant unlocked, I'd focus on getting the mobility upgrades before the weapon upgrades on this vehicle. And that's pretty much it, boys. In my opinion, the LAV-AD is pretty subpar when it comes to its air defense role. Helicopters like the Mi-28 or the Ka-50 completely outclass this thing in range. Bear in mind, the Mi-28 is around a similar battle rating to this thing, but practically has twice the range of engagement. The 6 kilometer range of the Stingers just doesn't work against helicopters. As I said, it's more like 3 kilometers. In an up tier, this does limit you substantially, but if an enemy does get within range, then the missiles on this thing generally are quite good, at least with the K variant. They've got a quite high probability of kill in my experience, but again, it relies on enemies being stupid enough to get close to the battlefield. In a down tier though, or a 10.0 match, I think the LAV is pretty good at clearing the skies. Its chain gun can be used against enemy tanks, especially if you get their sides. You can use it to destroy enemy barrels, enemy tracks, and generally just piss off enemy players. The rocket pod isn't the greatest, it doesn't have very good accuracy at medium to long range, while again you could get around the side of vehicles and shoot the rockets into them, but that isn't a particularly reliable strategy. I think this thing should go down in battle rating, to be honest. I'd say that the Ocelot is arguably better in the air defense role, it's just got an IRS tier whereas this thing doesn't. Anyway lads, what did you think of this video? Be sure to let me know down below in the comments, as well as what vehicle you would like to see me review next. If you think I did a good job with the video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribe, it really does help the channel grow. And finally, I'd just like to say a big thank you to my YouTube members: Levi Stark, Wolfie Fly, Joseph Metcalf, Tomster013, Just Someone, Dr. Bob, Daboa LX, Tans, William Tessier, and Lola Alfonsi. Thank you very much for watching, lads, and if you've made it this far into the video, leave a comment saying Skyrim belongs to the Nords.